Daredevil Season 2 doesn't have quite the same strong start as Season 1. Season 2 is very mixed. Season 1 was a brilliant build-up to dismantling Fisk. We saw both sides to the picture, the hero and the villain. It was close to perfection. With Fisk now imprisoned, the show had a difficult task, creating a villain that matches Fisk. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. In fact, the villains this season are pretty terrible. Whereas Fisk had a level of dimension to his character, the mysterious villainous organisation we follow in Season 2 are terrible. Entitled The Hand. Despite bringing back Nobu to lead their cause, the organisation is the definition of cliché storytelling. There just isn't that level of artistry or presence involved in Season 1's success. I should point out that The Hand were to be touched on more, but much of the backstory was cut by Jeff Loeb due to racist reasons, which only worsens the show overall. Essentially, The Hand are a faceless group of ninjas, a far cry from Fisk's grounded business dealings. Even if this season had more developed villains, Season 2 feels wildly different because of its pacing. The storyline for Season 2 is split into chunks where we follow the Punisher, Electra, Stick, and The Hand. There are a lot more elements going on that have their own mini-arcs, and it doesn't feel as well structured as Season 1. So overall, Season 2's direction just feels a lot less tight than Season 1. Also, there's drawn out court cases which won't be to everyone's taste. Season 1's legal investigation with Karen and Foggy felt personal and balanced with Daredevil's story, but Season 2 doesn't have the same drive behind it. The legal stuff just isn't as compelling this time around. Some entertaining presences in Season 1, such as Kingpin and Wesley, are no longer in the picture. Well, technically we see Kingpin, which I like, but only in small doses. The scene where Matt and Kingpin interact is fantastic, reminding us why Season 1 was so good. Even behind bars, Fisk's corruption can spread to the guards, and he can seem in power opposite Matt. I do think it was a wise choice to change the villain. Fisk was excellent, but his departure allows repercussions, and it makes the payoff in Season 3 a worthy wait. It's just a shame the second season's villains are far more generic. Now, as I said, Season 2 does have a lot going on with the introduction of both the Punisher and Electra, but it doesn't have the same strong focus. The first was slow in places, but all that time was used to enhance its storytelling. This season still has some great moments, and it is highly entertaining. A highlight for me was the introduction of the Punisher, which I didn't expect. I think he's a very boring comic book character, but he works alongside Matt's morality. The third episode, which has Matt and the Punisher disagree ethically, was a real highlight, letting you into both how Murdock and the Punisher think, with Punisher believing in hard justice and Daredevil believing in hope and redemption, both valid takes that drive their characters. Typically, you see characters trying to invoke justice work together, but the real conflict these two had was actually really refreshing. They both brought up some valid arguments that made me think, but I ultimately go with Matt's more optimistic outlook. Basically, the Punisher worked well as a character put into Daredevil's world who questioned his methods and shook things up. The Punisher and Electra extended the comic book world beyond Daredevil, leading the way for the other spin-offs. There's also a staircase scene that measures up to Season 1's famous hallway fight, so don't skip Season 2. The acting, dialogue, and tone are all still great. The season's overall plot just doesn't have the same strength. A lot of my issues with the season are resolved with Karen's end monologue, and Matt finally revealing Karen his identity, a tantalizing tease for the third season. Already, Season 3 gets on good terms with me by starting off on Matt's religious roots, nurtured by the priest from Season 1, a character whose presence was missed in the second season, and with Kingpin's return, the show is clearly trying to recall that first season. Season 3 is a huge step up from the second season. And that's saying a lot, since Season 2 wasn't bad, it just had some issues. Whereas Season 2 had pacing issues and the storyline seemed scattered, Season 3 brings us back to a more focused storyline, once again involving Daredevil and Fisk. However, this time, it has the reverence for the first season under its belt, utilising the time away from Fisk to make his presence really impactful. It would be very easy to attempt to recreate what worked in that first season between Fisk and Kingpin, yet fail to rise to the occasion. However, it doesn't fail. I would say it could even be considered better than Season 1, or at the very least matching it. Even Karen gets a follow up from her season 1 arc. Season 1 had a great arc of her growing in confidence. She started off as a frightened victim and ended at taking down Fisk's right hand man. Season 2 saw her bold investigations into the Punisher, and Season 3 sees her directly confront and threaten Fisk. I think the writers nail a character with agency and growth, yet she always feels believable. She's a badass, but she also feels like a human being beyond these cool moments. I can't really decide if I prefer the first or third season because they're both brilliant. Season 3 manages to pitch an epic rematch with Wilson Fisk, now out of prison and quickly gaining control of those around him. When Fisk is reunited with lover Vanessa, it works because it's after more than a season apart from each other. Reuniting with Vanessa is all he cared about during prison, and he finally gets it in Season 3. Fisk is the real devil, not Daredevil, and he returns once again like a bad penny to Matt Murdock's deep frustration. The guy just can't catch a break. In Season 3, it juxtaposes our protagonists with care. Matt begins the season broken and in need of healing. His time as Daredevil has taken its toll on him, and there's a good time where Matt's out of the picture as Fisk grows in power. Matt really takes time to reflect and train before getting back into fighting shape. In Season 3, it's mostly religion that guides Matt. In its own way, the church acts as his Batcave as he rises to oppose Fisk, training mentally and physically to stop him. The season differentiates itself by splitting Matt from his friends, almost on a solo quest against Fisk. Instead of leaning on Foggy and Karen, Matt leans on religion, using the orphanage as a sort of home base. It only means more religious overtones, which were sorely missed in Season 2. It really shakes things up for the better, and allows for plenty of rich dialogue and contemplation from our hero. The season follows that classic storytelling trope of the relatable underdog protagonist rising against the powerful corrupt villain. And frankly, it plays out to perfection. We see the two worlds of Matt and Fisk as their inevitable clash looms, prepared for throughout the season like a long-awaited boxing match. It's such a meticulous build between the two because they both rise from their lowest point in the second round, experiencing personal pushes that drive the emotional storytelling. I said in Season 1 how much I appreciated the religious aspect, and Season 3 wisely doubles down on that. The church becomes a place of sanctuary for Matt while he recuperates, whereas Fisk has a fancy penthouse. There is a continual contrast that divides the two throughout, but it also enhances anticipation for their reunion. Matt's long talks with Sister Maggie delve into philosophical territory, the human voice which makes this show top tier. If you thought Father Lantom was engaging in Season 1, Sister Maggie is just as wise. However, she's far more of a pushy figure toward Matt, and we eventually find out that's because she's his mother. A truly shocking twist that widens Matt's world and allows a deeper dive into his history that doesn't feel like needless filler. Indeed, Matt's mother and the guidance of God allows Matt to rise to face Fisk once again in a climactic face-off. When Matt is pushed to the edge in an angry outburst, it's a terrifyingly thrilling performance. Fisk's path of corruption and death is endless. It pains Matt deeply to see Fisk's grip of control, and Daredevil enjoys putting him back in his place once again. A truly passionate performance from Charlie Cox, one that highlights the pained man behind the mask, doing what he must for the people of his city because of people like Wilson Fisk, the element that continues to plague society. When Daredevil eventually faces off with Fisk, the moment has been earned. It feels like an event. Fisk and Daredevil beat each other up in the best way possible, and I loved every second of it. Season 3 shows us that without his close friends, Matt can become an angrier character, driven to kill Fisk, closer to him in a way, before he carries out justice and is reunited with found family. Because Kingpin's threat is so personal, there is a moment when Matt unleashes anger and revenge, but in the end he chooses civilized justice and that's what matters. Matt knows that to cross that line is to truly become the devil. Season 3 just manages to capture Season 1's strengths without feeling repetitive or lesser. It's an excellent season that's written and paced very well, a perfect sequel to that first season. In the end, Matt's monologue at Father Lantom's funeral reminds us the power of forgiveness. It leaves us in the perfect place to watch Matt's journey continue. Though Matt might get satisfaction knowing Fisk isn't a threat, he knows to never cause the thing that created his trauma, to never cross that strict line. It separates Matt from people like Wilson Fisk and sets an example to the people of New York City. That to me is art, that is religion, that is a hero. What's great about Season 3 is that it follows Matt go through such a low point. At the start he's physically and mentally broken, and throughout the season he goes through highs and lows to ultimately beat Fisk and reunite with friends despite the odds. Matt experiences hard truths, but he finds the strength to persevere and forgive because of his generous heart. It's a season full of struggle that ultimately leads to triumph.